This is Michael Woodward, and this is episode 97 of the Jumbo Think podcast.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Jumbo Think podcast, a podcast focused on telling the stories of dreamers, makers, innovators, and influencers. Along the way, we give you some tips and ideas how you can chase your own big idea and dream and create the world you want to live in. Our guest on today's episode is Vanessa Shaw. More about Vanessa in a moment. Our guest on Friday's episode is Alex Moscow. Alex has led a multi-million-dollar coaching and seminar organization. He helps world-renowned coaches and speakers to grow their business, and they have sold over $1.7 million in coaching packages. They offer many programs, including Effortless Enrollment, the Inspired Action Mastermind, Small Events, Big Profits, and the Protege Program. It is a super fun episode, so make sure to check out our episode with Alex Moscow this Friday. It has been so much fun creating the Jumbo Think podcast this last year. We've had amazing guests, just giving us incredible insights into the world of business and entrepreneurship. I want to make sure that you check out some of those past episodes and you don't miss any of the amazing guests coming up in the future. There are several ways you can do it. You can swing on over to jumbothink.com/podcast, jumbothink.com/podcast, and you can check out each of the episodes in the episode notes there. You can also find links to some of your favorite places to listen to podcasts. You can find us at all the typical places like iTunes, Stitcher Radio, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, YouTube, and now even on Stitcher Radio. No matter where you listen to podcasts, we're probably there. So head on over, search for the Jumbo Think podcast, click that follow or subscribe button, and never miss another episode of the Jumbo Think podcast. Now let's jump into today's episode with Vanessa Shaw. Today's show is brought to you by FreshBooks.com. Get a free 30-day trial at www.gofreshbooks.com/jumblethink. That's www.gofreshbooks.com/jumblethink. Hey there, welcome to the Jumbo Think podcast. My name is Michael Woodward, and I am the host. I'm super excited to have you along for our guest today. Her name is Vanessa Shaw. She is a success coach and a sought-after speaker. She is an expert in business mastery, personal leadership, and how to create a 6 to 7 figure income strategy. Vanessa is the creator of the Boutique Business Model and School. She has an international business background working with top corporate executives and ambitious entrepreneurs just like you, helping them go from the startup to the billion-dollar company. In the past, she has worked for the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland. Vanessa also holds a senior leadership role in the International Coach Federation. So let's jump into the conversation we had with Vanessa Shaw. Vanessa, I am super excited to have you on the podcast. It's been a lot of fun as I've read through your blog and learned a lot about you. First off, how are you today?
Yeah, I'm really well, thank you. Especially since we're speaking after Thanksgiving weekend. So I'm actually very well rested. Looking forward to the week.
It's always fun when you can get those little breaks in there to re-energize and spend time with the people that matter most and, just reattack the world after that break.
I couldn't agree more. I really enjoyed the break. I needed it.
Now, you are in the world of business and you help people with success coaching and inspiring them to go and do amazing things. Tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got into what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Because kind of how I got into it and what I do today, they're probably not worlds apart, but like everything, that there's been a big transition. So really what we're doing today is helping, I think the nutshell piece of this is we're helping, business owners build a life that really delights and excites them by doing the work that they love. That's really the business that we're in. How did we, start out? And this is actually now over a decade ago. I think we're almost in business 12 years, and that was when I was back in Europe. I started out as honestly a girl with a dream. I know you work with a lot of dreamers and innovators. Yeah. And mine was always this dream to run my own business. And I've no idea where that even came from. It was quite quite illogical. Nobody in my family had ever run a business. And that was from a very young age. So I wanted to run my own business, and I knew that it had to be a business that made a positive impact in the world. And obviously back then I would have never even used that language, but that was the feeling that I had around it. So I had been a stay-at-home mum for a decade, supporting my husband in his global career, bringing up two, gorgeous kids. Probably didn't describe them quite as gorgeous back then because I was at home with them all day long, but they are lovely now.
Yeah.
now that they're grown and they're young adults. And I then retrained as a life coach. That was my sort of re-entry into the workforce after a decade at home. I figured I was quite unemployable anyway, and I honestly didn't have a clue which direction I would even begin to go in. So I started off as a life coach and just thought, well, I'll have a bit of cash on the side, a few clients, and started off small. And then very quickly, and it was within months, there was an opportunity that presented itself for me to go and give a talk at a major law firm. And, cut a long story short, I was terrified, went in there, saw it as an opportunity, and gave this talk, was able to make an offer, and launched what then became probably one of the first virtual coaching programs inside a major law firm.
Wow.
And that was, so now all of a sudden I jumped from life coaching to performance coaching and executive coaching. It's really working at the highest levels within that organization. And I kept that going for about 3.5 years. I had other coaches working under me. And, life was good. Life was good until I lost the deal, Michael, is the honest to God truth. And like all these things, big business mistake number one was I'd actually put all of my eggs into one basket, and I'd grown, my consultancy back then inside a business. But once things changed and I lost that deal, then I lost most of my income, like 85% overnight.
Wow.
So that was a turning point. I was still in Europe then. I think that was about 7 years ago now, and it was definitely a dark moment. I wasn't jumping for joy at the time. I don't think we ever are at the time. But the gift was just an opportunity to actually dream again. If I'm really honest, I think I was disconnected from my passion and what I'd gone into business for. I'd sort of started to go down a track that the money was great, and it had come fairly easily. But honestly, my passion and the big dreams were definitely disengaged. And so that's when I re-dreamt up the business and discovered, who I love to work with. And that's definitely more the entrepreneurial types. And started to change my focus. Then the big dream, I'm sort of jumping you through dreams here and like major points, was once I'd got my business back off the ground again and realized my mistakes and sort of set about, basically rebuilding it. I was honest enough with myself to say my big dream is to come and live in the States.
Okay.
It wasn't to be in Europe. I was living in Switzerland at the time, and I was just done. It was no longer exciting. So at the point where I'm revamping everything.
Yeah.
I closed it all down and I moved to the States. I've actually been living my dream of living in the States and building my business now for the last 5 years.
That's really, really cool. There's so many things we could dive off of with that. But one thing I wanted to bring up was you worked for the United Nations in Geneva? Is that true?
I did.
Wow.
Yes, that's true. And God, what question have you got about that? Because I'll always dive in and say something. You probably go, wow, I'd love to know this.
Well, it sounds like an adventure and being on the pulse of what's happening globally, probably at a different level than most of us experience.
Yes, and it definitely was. There were some amazing things that I was involved in. I have to say it does feel like a different life now.
Wow.
My career in the UN was not long-lived. I think it was about 6 years. My husband, on the other hand, he actually had a 30-year career. So when I say I was supporting him, he really was, global and at the cutting edge of what he was doing. But some lesser known facts about me is that at one point I was part of coordinating the airlift into Sarajevo
Oh, wow.
during the war.
Yeah.
I worked for the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. I absolutely loved that work, and being at the humanitarian edge of not business, because obviously there's big global organizations, but really love that. However, the internal workings of big organizations like that, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And that was the piece I found so challenging. And that for me to have got anywhere significant inside those organizations, it was basically a lifetime. And,
Yeah.
if you know what the entrepreneurs are like, we want it yesterday, we want it quicker,
Yeah.
we see opportunity. And I just realized that personality wise, I was never, ever going to be happy.
Yeah.
Long term inside the organization. So that's why, that opportunity to really think about what is it that I wanted that would really light me up years later was the place that I dived in.
You mentioned that you spent a big chunk of your life. Obviously, you're from Europe. You can hear it in your accent. You've spent at least 6 years now in the United States. You've probably had a lot of exposure to the United States. I remember a few years ago, I was going through some Myers-Briggs surveys, and they were talking about the difference of personality types, and when it came to the distribution globally of what it looked like for different personality types from Europe to the Americas, and different mindsets there. When you view and talk to these different business owners or executives that you work with, can you tell a difference in mindset between Europe and the U.S. when it comes to the approach for business, the approach for entrepreneurship, and maybe even risk taking?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Gosh, I'd love to know what those statistics are, because mine's anecdotal, right? And from my experience as opposed to real stats. But one of the things I've always said, and I think that was why I wanted to move here, is I love your attitude, and I say yours, like the US attitude of entrepreneurship, gung-ho, let's give it a go, this sort of positive, predominantly positive mental attitude. And I guess it's that, the belief in the American dream, right, that's still alive in so many places. And I think we see that a lot in entrepreneurship, in creation and innovation, and like really being pioneers of, and like mapping out our own destiny. That's the piece that I was very attracted to when I was in Europe. And again, like everything, right? There's a negative to everything if we choose to focus on it. Because I think, the US, I love that you seem to have a level of confidence, and as I say, this gung-ho attitude that I think we don't have as much in Europe, and particularly perhaps in the UK. I think we're very self-deprecating over there, and to our detriment at times. Now, as I say, everything's got a negative, right? So there are times when I think people, over here, perhaps they inflate things a little bit too much, or, are they overly optimistic about what can be achieved? But personally, I find that more appealing than this constant sort of, it's not even putting ourselves down, but, just kind of playing small and not wanting to shine quite as brightly. And for me now, working with entrepreneurs, it's okay. I mean, I wouldn't say it's completely welcomed, but it's a really okay subject to talk about dreams and desires and big goals, and talk about living a life well, and talk about, wealth and making a difference. Those are conversations that I just find are so much more accessible over here than previously when I was in Europe.
It's pretty incredible. I mean, I've heard these stories for years, and like I said, I went into the study looking with some people about that, and it was amazing to me that just the fact of where you live, or people always equate it to the school you go to and that kind of thing, but environment can have such an impact on the outlook of what you can do and what's possible and the change you can make in the world.
Oh, it's massive. I mean, I think it was Jim Rohn that said famously, you're the average of the 5 people that you hang around with the most,
Right,
right?
right.
And in fact, I've just thought of another distinction that I'd love to share as well, because I think it's a really important one. But again, that environment. Who are you surrounding yourself with? What are the conversations that you're inside of? Who's inspiring you? Are you surrounded by people that are way ahead on the path that you want to be on, that are really looking to live their best life or do amazing things in the world? Because when we're not surrounded by that, I mean, it really holds us back. And I think that other distinction I wanted to come back to,
Right,
certainly,
yeah.
Europe compared to, let's say, my experience. I want to own it as my experience of Europe compared to living here. I find it so refreshing that over here, so many people talk about going into therapy, getting help. Coaching obviously is massive. I mean, really started over here. We're about 10 years behind in Europe as far as the coaching businesses as well are concerned. And there's just that openness to be able to talk about self-development, personal development. We've had challenges, that we're getting help, whereas those can be conversations that we kind of keep behind closed doors in
Yeah,
Europe.
yeah.
We're sort of like, oh, perhaps, we shouldn't share those things, or we'll be judged, or, really, if I'm speaking to a coach, it must mean that I've got something wrong with me, as opposed to I'm proud that I've got a coach because I want to be the best version possible of myself.
Yeah, and I think that's a powerful advantage. I mean, and you said to every positive there are negatives, and that is an advantage that I think through that the discovery of mindset, thought process, and how you view the world, it's really powerful how you can step forward into the possibilities that are endless, whether it's here or elsewhere.
Absolutely.
I think this is a really good launching point for a deeper conversation I really wanted to dive into. And it's something we hear a lot about on the podcast from several guests that we've had. And I think we see it a lot on social media now. And that's the whole concept of zone of genius. Can you tell us a little bit about zone of genius and what that means and some of your thoughts around it?
Yeah, and I want to preface that by saying it's actually something I've been focusing on a lot more in the last couple of years, right? So this isn't something like that was there from day one. But I remember an entrepreneurial friend of mine, actually, I'd met him, at a conference. I think we completely clicked, and we'd have these conversations around business. And he was a lot more advanced in business than I was. And he used to he had a different term for it, but it was the same thing. And he would often say that, when people are really advancing in business, they're starting to look at, what are perhaps the top 3 things that they do extremely well, where they do those things for free if they could. I mean, they just light them up. They're very easy. They can build mastery in them, and of course, that those are activities that are adding value. And I remember hearing that conversation for the first time, as a newbie business owner. It's like 3 things. Like, my list has always got like 50 things on
Right,
it. Like,
right.
really?
Yeah.
And just I'd never ever stopped to think about that. But then, as our business has grown, and we've had, we've had very consistent business growth since being here in the States, and that's typically looked like pretty, 33% or 50%,
Wow.
business growth minimum, right? And other years where it's been 100% or more. So, I mean, again, consistently. And what that meant that I had to start to really look at is, as we've grown the business, is looking at, yes, really and truly, where are those places that I'm energized, that I'm operating from my strengths, and that I'm in that zone of genius. And it's looking then at those other zones that could frankly be what we call zones of competence,
Hmm.
zones of even excellence, where we've got the skills, we've learned, we've had to build the skills, as most entrepreneurs have, because we wear multiple hats.
Right.
But those activities just no longer energize us. And it's a conversation I've had to be in the last couple of years. As I say, we've just gone through, rapid growth. I mean, particularly these last 2 years, hosting multiple events, with hundreds of people, and just
Right.
tons of moving parts. And it's required me to have an awful lot of energy and consistent energy. And so I've had to look at, well, what are those things that I just find so draining that, again, I could be quite good at, but somebody else, the chances are somebody else is probably a lot better at it than I am and can even do it quicker. So for me, that zone of genius, as I say, I'm always looking at it as the leader, as to, what really lights me up. One of the biggest, and the reason I became fascinated by this is when I was more, in the more executive coaching role, I would be working with a lot of, top performers that were honestly getting burnt out. And one of the reasons they were getting burnt out is, or, jaded at the least, was they had way too many things on their plate, right? Way too many responsibilities. Juggling all of those moving parts. And they would often find that the very thing that they kind of gone into business for in the first place, now that they were managing so many other people, right, that thing that they love to do was, perhaps they were getting to do it 5 or 10% a week, right? There were just these little small pockets. And they would find themselves doing so much admin, managing all of these other things. And so it was seeing it firsthand there. And again, back then I wasn't referring it to a zone of genius. It was like, wow, something has to shift. So as we grow the business, I'm looking to hire people that are in their zones of genius. Their zones of genius, obviously I want those to kind of overlap with mine and or be completely different,
right?
So that they're bringing completely different skill sets to the table, but that they're really energized as well by what they're doing. So the idea of it when we're teaching this as a concept, and again, even we teach what we're frankly, applying in our own business, is we start to look at how much time in any given week am I spending in my zone of genius. And I always know that if I'm not spending time there, it's never going to be the best week. I'm going to feel exhausted probably when it gets to the end of the week.
Right.
And then looking to, as the business grows, I'm looking to, okay, what things can I really get off of my plate that somebody else can do and help me with that's in their zone of genius? I've got a really crazy example, frankly, of this one today, even as I talk about it. But I want to give such a practical example because it showed up today. My assistant, amazing young girl. I mean, she's like 22. I love her because she thinks so differently and just has all these lovely, funny expressions and everything that she uses.
Right.
One of the things that she loves to do is run errands.
Okay.
She loves running errands because she loves to be on the move.
Okay.
Again, younger generation does not want to be stuck behind a desk. She's fine, with a laptop and doing certain things. But if I can say that there are things where she's physically got to move, her eyes light up. And she loves doing it. She loves going out, and if she's running errands, getting the best deals and, shopping for things and all the rest of it, and saving money and looking at, oh my gosh, I got all these things for the business. And she's completely lit up by that.
Wow.
And she also has amazing organizing skills as well. Okay. So, we've just come off a Thanksgiving weekend. We've also just come off a big live event, which means there's always just a lot of, pieces that need to be reorganized and kind of as we move on to the next phase. And today was one of those. I could see she's just looking at me kind of going, can I have one of my days? She wants to be in her zone of genius today. I mean, that's it, And it was so we were kind of laughing because the things that were on my to-do list were just things that, I'm like, if I do these, I'm going to be drained and bored. It's going to probably take me way longer, because I'll be resisting. And yet there she is saying, oh my God, just let's get this list written. I can't wait to get on with this.
That's awesome.
So I think that, that's the nice thing when it, it really works well, that, spending time in our zone of genius is typically something we're going to really enjoy. And there shouldn't be too much resistance around it. So that's what also means that if things can just flow so much easier and smoother in the business.
What are some steps to kind of get through the mud of that and find those zones of genius? Because I think so often when we're in the daily grind, when we're facing project deadlines, or when we're facing whatever it is in our business that's challenging us for the moment, we're so focused on being in the business that we don't take the time to really assess where we're at and how it's impacting us? How can individuals really start tuning that a zone of genius and moving into it instead of just floating through life, responding to the situations that face them?
I love that question. And it's not necessarily, it's a question I get asked a lot. And as I say, it's not necessarily the easiest thing. So I want to
Yeah.
preface that by saying it's going to be a study over time, and it will evolve, because as the business grows, there comes a time where, there may be things that were in a zone of genius previously, that all of a sudden we're discovering a new zone, right? And we're wanting to evolve into that as well. So it's not
Right.
necessarily something we're married to for life, although I do believe there's traits inside of it that will always run true. So for me, one of the ways, honestly, that I started, I tend to be really practical on these things, is I was challenged. I can't remember who by, or whether I read it in a book, but it was literally to do like a shopping list of all of the activities that I was doing on any given day. So, we're busy. We're all busy.
Yeah.
And but it was like, really, what am I doing? What are all of these different activities? And as I say, almost making a shopping list of them, and all the crazy things that we often do without even thinking, right? Because we've had to. So I wouldn't remember what it was back then, but, there would be sending out emails, reading emails, scheduling client appointments, this marketing piece, that marketing piece. Then there would have probably been a whole load of personal errands in there as well, personal stuff, because we run a home-based business.
Yeah.
But it was this whole shopping list first and foremost. And I think, on any given day, there are at least probably 30 different things that I was doing. And then it was a case of really going through there first and foremost to look at what are the things that I really dislike doing out of those things. Like, I'm not even thinking about it, but what do I really dislike doing? And it didn't matter at that time that if I had a solution for it or not. It was just bringing it to my awareness.
Yeah.
So I always remember one of my ones I've hated doing since I first went out in business, because I'm just not good at it, and was scheduling appointments.
Okay.
I always found now we have different tools as well, but still I found the going backwards and forwards, trying to get people on calendars and all the rest of it. I always used to find that a nightmare. And then I'd be working across time zones and mistakes would happen. And then you go, oh, it was just this whole, ugh.
I've been there. I know it.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. I mean, exactly. That's part of it's still part of my business now, but I just don't do it. So first and foremost, as I say, it's to look at those things that you really don't like doing, that are very energy draining. And then it is starting to look at, well, who else could actually do those things? Now, again, I get it, right? That there's points in business where we just don't have all the resources. We're could be bootstrapping a business in the early days, and we can often think that we don't have the resources. But I started out very early on with a VA. Okay. And I realized then that, hang on a minute, I don't have to employ somebody. I don't have to give full-time help. But I think my first VA was probably 5 hours a week, a very minimal amount, so that I could get some of those things off of my plate.
Right.
And the more, so it was always this process of what are the things that I really dislike doing. If I had more time, what are those things that I really want to be doing more of? And of course, in business, it's the things that I want to be doing more of in this particular case that add value to the business, right?
Right.
So for me, one of my zones of genius is speaking. Being in front of a room, speaking live, even now, conversations like this, it's just very, very easy. It's very pleasurable. It completely lights me up. And it's of huge value to the business. But if I'm getting bogged down with scheduling appointments on my calendar, right, I don't get to get out in front of live audiences.
Yeah.
So that was honestly the beginning of the process. And then it becomes, that's a process we have to keep going through time and time again, because I do find, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, that there's just things I take for granted that I'm doing. And I have to stop and ask myself, could somebody else be doing this for me?
Yeah.
Does it really have to be me?
Yeah.
Really. And at that point, oftentimes it's, the answer is no. And in my particular case, I've really encouraged my team now as well. They know that, at times I can slip back into some of those old habits. So they'll be sort of, no, Vanessa, we can start this. Let us take it off your plate. Let us do, they'll sort of encourage me to let go of things that they can see I'm in a rut with.
Yeah.
So now you've got the team supporting as well. But as I say, in the early days when it was just me, then that's how I looked at it, got started with a VA.
That's really good. It's really, really good. I want to pivot here a little bit and get into some of the nitty gritty of business and into the things that a lot of business owners, I know that I've struggled with it at different times in my business, and I'm sure others have too. The first thing I really wanted to talk about was this great article that you wrote, blog post you wrote about process versus wow. And you tell the story of Disney and why you really go there. And can you tell us a little bit about why we need to be focusing on the wow and not so much the process?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in a nutshell, the process is typically so boring, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and again, I love this conversation because I always think when clients are coming to us, they are never, ever coming to us because of the process that we're going to take them through.
Right.
They're not. They're coming, they want the results, they want the outcomes. I mean, in that article, it's a while ago since I wrote that now, but again, that the whole Disney thing is, of course, we all want to be there at Disney having an amazing time, enjoying the rides and everything that there is to offer. But if we started to think about the drag of really planning everything and understanding everything that goes on behind the scenes and all of those details and all of the crowds and all of the rest of it,
Yeah.
we get bogged down in that, and all of a sudden it's not that exciting.
Right.
And I see this as a big mistake, because frankly, it was a big mistake I used to commit myself. And then because once I could, see the way to correct it, I see it with so many other business owners, is they're always talking about their process.
Yeah.
I mean, in coaching, it becomes we're going to have 6 coaching sessions, or in another thing, it's like we're going to have all of these meetings or all of these sessions, and they don't mean a thing. Right. And people truly don't care.
Yeah.
Whereas if we start to talk about and have those conversations around what are the outcomes that those clients are really looking to achieve, what does success look like if they were really satisfied with it? What does it look like? And let's put the focus there, right? Because that's what people are really paying us for. And frankly, that's the motivation to keep going. Again, I think about that for myself. I'm always looking at the end game through the tough times, because it's like, okay, that's my carrot.
Yeah.
If I have to think about every single small little step, and we're going to do this first, and we're going to do that, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, you just get bogged down in details. The other part of that as well is that painting the story. We remember feelings far more than we're going to remember details and the things people say to us. So when we've had a conversation with a client about evoking what does success look like, whatever it is that we're helping them with, right, they're going to naturally get into the feeling of that, and they remember it. We all do, right? So now we've got something that we're grounded in, that's going to pull us forward, that feels far more compelling, and that helps us navigate. Of course, there is a process and a step by step. Even people that are building houses. In fact, I'm surrounded by people that seem to be doing house renovation at the moment. I mean, nobody wants, the dust, the inconvenience, the noise, their home in complete chaos. I mean, that's not what we sign up for. But the end game of it, when you're sitting back and you're really enjoying that lovely environment, is the piece that becomes exciting. So we've got to start to, get people into the story of that, into the feeling of it. That's what they're really investing in. And okay, then the how we do it is the process, but honestly, we don't need to put so much attention there. We can, I like to really simplify even our process now. We've kind of, simplified it into 3 main steps. It's like design, attract, and deliver. Yeah. We don't go into all of the minutiae that are involved in every single thing that you need to do to grow a business.
Yeah, completely. I really love that blog post because I could relate to it with my own business. When we were doing web development at a very large level, working with hundreds of clients per year. I I would always go in and there would be one thing that my goal was, and that was to say, we're going to solve your problem. They didn't care if we used WordPress or Drupal or what the platform was. They just wanted to know, is this going to solve my problem? And I think so often we're so focused on proving ourselves that we don't really stop to listen and hear what the pain points are so that we can come in with empathy and love and say, here, we can help you through this process, and we're going to make it easy so that you get the results you want.
I love that, and you said something there. I want to double piggyback off that because it's so important, right? In that conversation, as you say, it's like, are we coming from a place of trying to impress, right, and convince that person that we're that we are the right fit? And as you say, often that looks like stuff, right? We're going to share with them stuff, and tons of information, and how knowledgeable we are, and all the rest of it. And it's us often, doing the talking then, as opposed to, as you say, really eliciting what is the problem that they're looking to solve, what does it look like, and getting the client engaged. And I'm always amazed. As a coach, I do ask questions. It's kind of nice to be on the receiving end today, because that's my business is so much, about asking questions first and foremost before I kind of dive in with different resources. But I'm always amazed that when we ask great questions, people will turn around and say, wow, like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. You totally get me. Like, you've completely understood. Like, oh my gosh, like, this is the first time somebody's, ever understood this so as clearly as I'm trying to explain it here. Yeah. And the truth is, we've not possibly even said that much, but we've just asked some really great questions. Yeah. And the client then feels really heard and understood. And then you're naturally positioned as the obvious solution and the obvious person for them to enroll with anyway, because it's not like you had this great conversation and now they're going to say, okay, great, well, I'll just go and look for another service provider. Right. I mean, you've naturally become the solution in their eyes.
Well, and it makes you stand out because everyone else is trying to approach it from that. We're going to prove we're the best people from you. We're going to prove that our process is the right one for you. We're going to prove that our platform, our solution's the best one for you. And people really don't want that. So when you approach it from that other avenue, from that other side way in, all of a sudden people are like, oh, this is fresh. It feels authentic. It feels genuine. It feels true. And people really want that and really push into it.
And it's so much easier for us as a service provider as well. I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, it is. It takes a load off. It really does.
It does. Now, you've written a whole bunch about the nuts and bolts of understanding clients and pricing, and how some of the things that we often do, like free strategy sessions or more clients, are the solution to getting the right clients. But you really don't think that that's the solution. So tell us a little bit about what the misconceptions are around clients, and maybe some of the things that as business owners or entrepreneurs, we could really be stepping back and reevaluating our approach to that.
Yeah, love that. So let's start with the clients, and then let's back into pricing, because I can sort of address a couple of things there. So all of us, right, when we're in business and we're growing a business, of course, we ultimately do want more clients typically, right? It typically does look like that. However, it's more of what type of clients is the question that we really have to be asking ourselves. And because a lot of people are that they're sort of like, well, if I just had more clients, it would solve the problem. Well, it won't solve a problem of business growth if they're the wrong clients to start with, if they're very draining, if you're spending way too much time and energies trying to solve their problems, if they're nickeling and diming you, if they're not paying you, right? If they're just kind of those clients that, and we've all had them, but it doesn't actually matter whatever you do, you're never going to please them. Having more of those types of clients will never help. Yeah. And so, we love to look at segmenting, and I hate that term. I just haven't kind of.
Oh, I do too.
I know I haven't kind of found another. It's a very businessy term. I don't typically use terms like that, but let's see if we can think up another term that'd be fun. But basically, just sorting our clients. I even prefer that into different categories. So we call them champagne clients, that are they're fun. We love to work with them. They're very energizing, high end, because we're all about the boutique business model. Hence, champagne clients. Yeah. And so the idea there is that we really want to fill our business with champagne clients. And in our world, those are typically fairly long-term clients as well. So we're not constantly in this churn of, delivering a service, doing the work and then, having to hurry to get the next clients. Then we talk about wine clients and beer clients. So wine clients honestly can become, they can be great to work with as well. Wine clients can sometimes become beer clients, and sometimes they can become champagne clients. And we sort of need to know where they can go there.
Right.
But beer clients are the ones that oftentimes, as I say, will, be incredibly demanding, have very high expectations, of you as a service provider, probably don't show up that well themselves as the person that you're doing business with. And again, oftentimes there can be challenges around what they expect for the price that they're willing to pay. So it's like the shift in dynamics is completely unbalanced there. And so depending on the size of business and the structure of business, we're, advocating like fill your business with champagne and wine clients.
Okay.
And if they're, the beer clients, there may be a way to serve them, but not in a way that perhaps is direct in the business. So if we've got more leveraged business models and things that don't require you as the expert or the service provider kind of directly hands-on, that can be a way to serve them, right? But we've got to think very strategically around sort of how that fits in the business. First and foremost, it's really defining who is that ideal sort of champagne client for your business,
right,
so that you're actually marketing to those people, really speaking their language to attract them and building your business for champagne clients. And this is in our business model, but we love to hang out with our champagne clients. I mean, they're fun people. They're up to great things in the world. These are, we say, do clients pass the dinner test? Because like, if we wouldn't want to go and hang out with them over dinner and like share a nice bottle of wine and long conversation, why are we working with them, right? That's kind of one of our ways to test. But then here comes the next piece then around pricing, is if your pricing model is off, again, no, it doesn't matter how many more clients you get, it possibly doesn't solve that problem, especially when we're in the business of providing service, right? It's different when there's, a scale and we're selling widgets, perhaps, then we can get into, volume. But most of us are certainly in my world, are in service-based businesses. If that pricing is off to begin with, we just magnify that problem by serving more clients, working harder, and we've got the pricing wrong.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons why it's that the whole notion of champagne clients, because those people that are really looking for the expert, that are looking for perhaps a more high-end quality service, they're willing to pay for that. They want that trusted advisor, that type of partnership. They're probably not looking for the quick fix. As I say, they're going to be in it for the longer term and not, jumping from one thing to the other. But they're also going to be willing to invest. And when I say invest, it's time, money, and energy, right? Because it's never just money. But they're going to be willing to invest in the process as well. And from the service provider's perspective, and this is where, again, I made this massive mistake myself, hence why I teach it now. But we just have to think about all of the other factors that go into pricing. Because sometimes we're saying, well, it's just our time, and so it doesn't matter, and we're pricing by the hour, without thinking about all of the years we've invested in ourselves, the qualifications, our expertise, the fact that we could, probably get to a much better solution if we're an expert, that, far quicker and far better than somebody else, right? All of these things have inherent value in them. But then we've got to think about, in our pricing model, the real costs associated with being in business, right? Everything that it costs to be in business, and there's always expenses. Always. And then we've got to think about paying ourselves. We are an expense as well. We'd like to think we're an asset to the business, but that's the way that it's monetized from an accounting perspective, is we are a cost. And most service providers are not looking at their pricing through the lens of what do they need to actually pay themselves over and above covering their expenses. A lot of people have got this model of, well, I'll take out the expenses and then kind of what's left over is what I'll pay myself if I'm lucky. And that means the pricing is completely artificial. I've had people before say, well, I'm profitable. Like, well, let's look at the numbers. Like, how much are you paying yourself? Well, I can't afford to pay myself yet. Well, you're not profitable, because
Yeah.
if you had to pay, I mean, especially if you were in like the web development
Yeah.
business,
Yeah.
good luck getting good web developers for free, right?
Yeah.
I mean, then,
Oh, and I had employees, so I know the cost of good web developers and designers.
exactly, and it was like employees. I mean, there's no way.
Yeah.
So that pricing model, profit. It's such a shame, Michael. And I truly don't quite know why this is. Perhaps a conversation for another time. But profit seems to be a bad word in small business.
Yeah, it really
And
does.
it really does. And we've got to change that paradigm. I mean, I often refer to it as profit with a purpose.
Yeah.
Because when we are more profitable, there simply is more to go around. We can be more purposeful with that. And frankly, that could be that we're hiring more people or we're employing more people. I'm really proud of the fact that, I pay other people's salaries nowadays. I'm really proud that my business or our business can actually do that. We can give back if we're more profitable.
Yeah.
But we have to think about that notion of profit in our pricing, because we can't invest back in the business. We can't invest in ourselves. I mean, we put so many limitations on that. And for me, profit is something that when we're in small business for ourselves, we can choose to do a lot of good with it. And that's where I see these pricing models are so incorrectly put together.
Yeah.
And then even when I start to, this sparks a whole other conversation, because even when we start to work sort of through that model with people, and they go, you know what, Vanessa, you are so right. This totally makes sense. Like, now it's, the logic is there. The next thing becomes, well, oh my gosh, will people pay?
Yeah.
What if I can't find clients that are willing to pay that? Well, that's a great point. And if you can't, then that means you don't have a viable business.
Yeah.
Would it not be better to find that out sooner rather than later?
Or live a life where you're struggling for years and years and years.
Or live a life where you're struggling. And of course, most times that whole notion, the fear of not being able to find clients that pay is they're always amazed that there are plenty of clients that are really willing to invest, as I say, time, energy, and resources for great service and quality service providers.
You mentioned the boutique business model in school. You've got a cool event coming up. Tell us a little bit about that and the larger picture of what the boutique business model is and the school is.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So this was I said to you, we've kind of got our 3-phase process. If we're going to go back into process now, where we talk about, really designing a business that's really going to give you the life that you love, first and foremost. So in that design phase, we are looking at, really and truly, what are your goals? What do you want your life to look like? What type of business? What type of business model? Like, let's design it very intentionally, so that you stand a chance of winning. The next phase is then all about attract, because we start to look at who would be an ideal client for the business. Now we've got to look at attraction marketing through what I call masterful marketing, sharing our content, sharing our expertise in different ways, and because there's multiple different ways to do it. One of our ways that we do it is through live events. We do online as well, and podcasts like this. And then we also look at the third phase of that is delivery, right? If you haven't got good delivery, there's a lot of people that are very good at selling people into things, and then their delivery on the back end really sucks, and then you end up with obviously a bad reputation. So for us, those three really have to come together. And for me, the boutique business model was around, looking at the types of business owners that we're working with. The majority are not looking to grow an empire. I mean, they're not looking to have, oh my gosh, I want to be the next Google or, whatever big company it might be, Walmart. They want a business that they know is going to, do meaningful work that will create an impact in their part of the universe. And a lot of them, they want the lifestyle that goes with that as well. They want to have free time. They want to have time for family, enjoy Thanksgiving, right, without feeling like they're always on.
Right.
So the concept behind that boutique the boutique business model was around designing that business that is boutique, it's specialized. You're not, not pretending to be everything to everybody. You're going to provide higher end, more specialized quality service, and oftentimes to fewer people. That's one of the things when we run the numbers and we show people how this model can work, they go, wow, like I could do this. I could achieve those goals with like 30 clients. That tends to be a number that comes out quite a lot.
Wow.
And they're blown away, right? It's oftentimes doesn't require hundreds and hundreds of clients and all of the moving parts and transactions. So the Boutique Business School is our own programs where people are working with us, for a minimum year typically, and often multi-years to grow their business. And first level is we're taking them up to that $250,000 mark. I mean, a lot of them are honestly wanting to get to their first six figures. That's a big milestone in business, first out, and then $250,000. And then we have another higher program called Stella, which is about, taking it from 250K across seven figures.
It's really cool.
And so what we do with our intensives, and this was something we started doing last year, was how do we really take what we're teaching inside of our programs and actually make it more accessible on the outside? And so I think last year we did 4 boutique business intensives where 2 days, me in a room with a group of entrepreneurs, I'm going to run them through, some of the main concepts to get started. I'm a real believer in I'm going to give a ton of value over that weekend so that people walk away with very actionable items. But of course, we know full well that there's those people that say, wow, I know full well that this is great, and I need your help to implement and be accountable and, make sure that I'm in the right environment, right? The right group of people that are going to support me. So that's, a place where the right people will make an offer, and they'll apply to join us in one of our programs. But it's a great fun event. It's very hands-on. And we've got our next one coming up actually in January 2018.
Oh, cool.
So it's 20th and the 21st of January. If people even go to the website, vanessashaw.com /events, you'll see the events that we run there, and it's there. And so it's a very minimal investment to come, because our aim is to add a ton of value and just to wow and delight and create a wonderful experience. And as I say, for those people that want to work with us over longer term, there's an opportunity to do that. But my goal is you can also leave that weekend with very actionable items.
It's very cool. And you mentioned your website. How can people find and connect with you?
Yes, so one of the best places is definitely vanessashaw.com. Lots of things happening there. Facebook is where there's a lot of action actually these days, and there's going to be even more action as we move forward. So people can find me, Vanessa Shaw Business Growth Mentor. Connect with me there on our page. And for women in business, I'm a real advocate as well for women in business. We have a separate group that we're about to grow, which is called Bold Women in Business. And again, that's in Facebook. So those are places where we put out a lot of free content and really engage online with our community. So I'm always happy to see new faces there.
And we'll make sure to toss those links in the episode notes too, so they're really easy to find.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's always fun, doing the online pieces. Yeah. I spoke with somebody recently online, and it was so funny because she went, wow, like you're real, you really exist. And I said, I know. I said this online thing can be, we do so many live events that we're up close and personal with people. I said, I know that the online can feel a bit at times like, is it really real? Do you exist? I said, I do. I'm a real person. But we enjoy both.
Well, let's dive into some rapid fire questions as we move towards the end of the episode.
Okay, go.
The first question is, what is one tip you would give someone with a big idea or dream and they don't know where to start?
Get help.
Okay.
Honestly, it's got to be get help. And whether it doesn't have to be even paid help, somebody that's, knows how to give good help, knows how to really break it down for you, get you into some clear next steps and hold you accountable. Otherwise, that big idea will remain a big idea and probably won't move forwards with it.
What's one change you would like to see in the world?
Gosh, one change. Violence. That would have to be like that we live in a world that is non-violent.
Who or what inspires you?
My daughter inspires me an awful lot these days. She's 16 and a half. She's full of energy, very gung-ho. I just love her freshness and the way she looks at life, and she's very curious. So she's a massive inspiration in my life.
What do you want your legacy to be?
My legacy for my children first and foremost, and then into my, bigger community, is that, you really can live the life that you want to. I think it's a beautiful gift of life that we have, and that it's possible, and that it's even more possible if you're in business for yourself as well and pursuing that path of entrepreneurship.
What are you currently reading or watching?
Oh, like 20 books at once is the answer to that question, and like 20 TED Talks at once.
Oh, wow.
But a couple of really hot ones. One of my ones that I absolutely love and I dip into it the whole time is The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks.
Okay.
That one's amazing. It's kind of like, how we get in our own way and block ourselves with an upper limit. There's another one as well, which on the business side is called the Four Disciplines of Execution,
Okay.
which again is all about implementation, because at the end of the day, that is the piece that brings about change. So those are two that are on my bedside table right now.
What is one dream you're still wanting to fulfill in your own life?
Oh my gosh, these are great questions. I love these questions. One dream that I was wanting to fulfill is actually being fulfilled right now. So,
Okay.
So that one is, what's one dream? Actually, one dream is I want to go on a really beautiful safari. I want to go and see elephants out in the wild, and I've never done that. And that is definitely that's a big travel dream.
Vanessa, it's been a lot of fun chatting with you today. Thanks for taking time out and sharing your story and some amazing insights to our audience.
Thank you so much. It's been a ton of fun.
Once again, we want to thank today's guest, Vanessa Shaw, for taking time out to share her story. If you want to learn more about Vanessa, make sure to swing on over to jumblethink.com and check the episode notes. It has been so much fun creating the Jumblethink podcast this last year. We've had amazing guests, just giving us incredible insights into the world of business and entrepreneurship. I want to make sure that you check out some of those past episodes and you don't miss any of the amazing guests coming up in the future. There are several ways you can do it. You can swing on over to jumblethink.com/podcast, jumblethink.com/podcast, and you can check out each of the episodes in the episode notes there. You can also find links to some of your favorite places to listen to podcasts. You can find us at all the typical places like iTunes, Stitcher Radio, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, YouTube, and now even on Spotify. No matter where you listen to podcasts, we're probably there. So head on over, search for the Jumblethink podcast, click that follow or subscribe button, and never miss another episode of the Jumblethink podcast. For you, the listener of the Jumblethink podcast, FreshBooks is offering a 30-day free trial to give you the opportunity to try out their services. FreshBooks is the easy-to-use invoicing software designed to help freelancers, small business owners, and entrepreneurs to get organized, save time, invoicing, and get paid faster. FreshBooks is built to support the needs of growing businesses, just like yours. On average, customers double their revenue in 24 months. FreshBooks can also help you spend less time on the boring tasks like paperwork, invoicing, and reconciling your expenses, and freeing you up so you can spend your time on the parts of the business you love. To learn more about FreshBooks or to start your free 30-day trial, just go to www.gofreshbooks.com/jumblethink. That's www.gofreshbooks.com/jumblethink. On Friday's episode, our guest is Alex Moscow. He has led a multi-million-dollar coaching and seminar organization. He has helped world-renowned coaches and speakers to grow their business, and he has sold over $1.7 million in coaching packages. It is a super fun episode, so make sure to swing back this Friday for our interview with Alex Moscow. It has been a privilege to have you along for today's episode. I hope that you've learned a lot and that you've gotten some great tips and ideas of how you can chase your big idea and dream. Now it's up to you. You've got to go out there. You've got to take one step to move that big idea and dream into the world of reality. So get out there, do something awesome. Even if it's a small step, make that step and move forward. Thanks again for tuning in, and we can't wait for you to join us for our next episode of the Jumblethink podcast.
Lorsque vous aurez bien saisi la technique et que vous serez maître de votre corps, vous pourrez vous décontracter même en travaillant.